Two people, same city, same age, 34, both earning around $85,000 a year, which sounds comfortable until you actually run the numbers. The first person's Sunday nights have a specific feeling. That low-grade dread that starts creeping in around 7 p.m., when the weekend's officially over, but Monday hasn't technically started yet. They have a car payment, a mortgage on a house that costs 6 times their income, a $3,400 espresso machine on the counter they bought during a treat-yourself phase that hasn't fixed anything, and a 401k that technically exists but hasn't grown the way they were promised. They're not broke, they're just permanently almost okay. The second person is in bed by 9:30 on a Sunday reading a book. Their car is 8 years old and paid off. They haven't checked their work email since Thursday. They wake up Tuesday and book a flight. Not because they're rich, because they're free. Here's the thing nobody talks about. These two people probably have similar incomes. This isn't a story about who earned more, it's a story about who understood something that most people never figure out, and why the ones who figure it out almost never tell you about it. There's a documented psychological reason for the silence. We'll get to that. Oh, and there's a janitor in Vermont whose story is going to break every assumption this video is built on. We'll get to him too. My name is Nick, and I've spent way too much time researching why some people quietly disappear from the rat race while everyone around them keeps running. If you've ever looked at your calendar on a Sunday night and felt trapped by your own life, subscribe and hit that like button. And because today we're going to break down exactly what these people figured out and why it turns out to be almost entirely a psychology problem. Before we get into the psychology of the people who escape, we need to be honest about what the rat race actually is. Most people think they understand it. They don't. The rat race is a psychological system, and it's been engineered to be almost impossible to notice from the inside. Here's how it works. You get a raise, you feel great for about 6 weeks, then your lifestyle quietly inflates to match the new income. A nicer apartment, a car upgrade, dinners out that you now consider just normal Tuesday behavior, and somehow you're back to feeling like you don't have enough. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. Your brain adapts to every improvement and resets your emotional baseline right back to where it started. You get a $10,000 raise. By March, you have a Peloton you use as a coat rack and a subscription box habit you don't remember signing up for. The spending doesn't make you happier, it just raises the floor of what normal feels like, which means you need more to feel the same thing you felt before, and that's exactly how it's supposed to work. Then the Diderot effect kicks in. Denis Diderot, an 18th century French philosopher, received a luxurious scarlet robe as a gift and spent the next several months replacing everything in his study because nothing matched the robe anymore. One purchase made everything else look shabby. One upgrade, cascade of consequences. Sound familiar? That's not a personal flaw. That's documented human psychology. And consumer companies have had a file on it for decades. Layer social comparison on top, and you've got a fully operational trap. Your neighbor gets a new truck, and suddenly your perfectly functional car feels like a personal failure. This is not a character flaw. This is just your brain running software written in 1954 by a psychologist named Leon Festinger, who proved that humans evaluate themselves almost entirely by comparing to the people immediately around them. Which means the rat race isn't really about money, it's about everyone around you running, which makes standing still feel like losing. Here's the part that should genuinely shock you. The US personal savings rate sits around 3.6 to 5%, less than a nickel saved per dollar earned. Total household debt just hit an all-time record of $18.8 trillion, and 40% of Americans earning over $300,000 a year report living paycheck to paycheck. $300,000 a year, paycheck to paycheck. The rat race doesn't care how fast you're running. It just moves the finish line, and the fact that it swallows people at $300,000 proves this was never an income problem. It's a psychology problem. So what's actually different about the people who quietly slip out the side door? The research points to 4 things, none of them what most people assume. The first is internal locus of control. Some people believe their outcomes are mostly determined by their own actions. Others believe they're at the mercy of circumstances. Studies consistently show that people in the first group save more, make better financial decisions, and are more likely to pursue unconventional paths. They don't wait for the raise to feel financially stable. They build financial stability so the raise becomes irrelevant. The second is where identity lives. Most people still trapped in the rat race have their entire sense of self wrapped up in their job title, their team, their company. The job isn't just a paycheck, it's who they are at dinner parties. The people who escape have already built their identity somewhere else. A skill, a community, a project, a way of living. So when they give up the title, they're not losing themselves. They're just changing the address. The third is the hardest to see from the inside. At some point, a raise stops feeling like safety. You make more, you should feel better, but the needle barely moves. That's not ingratitude. That's your brain telling you you've crossed a threshold where more money was never going to be the answer. The rat race never tells you when you've crossed that threshold. It just keeps promising the next level will feel different. The fourth ties everything together. Morgan Housel put it best in The Psychology of Money: wealth is what you don't see. The people who escape quietly decouple their identity from their income. They stop using spending as a form of communication. Thomas Stanley spent decades researching this and found that the typical American millionaire has never spent more than $500 on a watch, drives an average car, and lives in an ordinary neighborhood. 80 to 85% of American millionaires are first-generation rich, and most of their kids grew up not knowing the family had real wealth because the parents never performed it. The cage is real, it's just upholstered, and the people who escape figure out the upholstery was optional. Here's the part I find most fascinating. Why do the people who escape do it quietly? Why don't they post the triumphant "I left my corporate job" essay? Most of them, especially early in the process, say almost nothing, and there's a well-documented psychological reason for that. When you exit a social group, you threaten the self-concept of everyone still inside it. Our sense of who we are is partly built on the groups we belong to. When someone leaves the grinding professional working toward a retirement they'll probably never take group, they're not just making a personal choice. They're implicitly questioning whether the group is worth belonging to. Human brains process that threat the same way they process a physical one. Then cognitive dissonance kicks in for everyone watching. People trapped in unfulfilling careers have already resolved their internal conflict. It's not that bad. Everyone has to work. At least I have stability. When someone demonstrates that escape is actually possible, those rationalizations shatter. The observer now has two choices: reconsider their entire life or dismiss the person who left. Guess which one most people pick. Must be nice to have that kind of money. That's not realistic for most people. We'll see how long that lasts, delivered with a very specific energy. There's also something called system justification theory, developed at Harvard in 1994, which found that humans are unconsciously motivated to defend existing social systems, even systems that disadvantage them. The rat race escapee isn't just leaving a job. In the mind of everyone still inside, they're attacking the legitimacy of the whole thing, which is why the pushback is so disproportionate to the action. You didn't just change careers, you committed heresy. So the quiet people aren't being modest. They're being strategic. They understand, consciously or through trial and error, that announcing the exit too early activates every social threat mechanism available to the people still running. So they keep their heads down, build quietly, and slip out the door while everyone else is arguing about whether the door exists. Here's where it gets interesting. And by interesting, I mean the math is so simple, it's almost offensive that more people don't know it. The single most important variable in financial independence isn't income, it's savings rate. If you save 10% of your income, you need roughly 51 years to reach financial independence. Save 25%, that drops to 32 years. 50% gets you there in 17 years. 65% around 10 years. 75%, 7 years. Not because you're earning more, because you're spending less, which lowers your target number and builds toward it faster simultaneously. The person saving 75% of their income and driving a 12-year-old Corolla isn't suffering. They just math their way to a Tuesday that belongs to them. The mathematical foundation is the 4% rule. from William Bengen's 1994 research. A portfolio of 25 times your annual expenses, withdrawn at 4% annually, has a 95% probability of lasting 30 years. At $40,000 in annual spending, the target is $1 million. At $60,000, $1.5 million. The number sounds large until you realize savings rate is the only lever that actually matters. Let me show you what this looks like for a real person. Nika, 31, software developer, $105,000 a year. Right now, she's saving maybe 8%. Nice apartment, newish car, brunches, the whole thing. At that rate, traditional retirement around 62 or 65, a perfectly normal outcome for a perfectly normal financial life, but Nika runs a different calculation. She cuts spending deliberately, not into poverty, just intentionally, and gets her savings rate to 55%. 2 years later, at 33, she has $170,000 invested. At a 7% real return, that $170,000 grows to approximately $1.08 million by the time she's 60. Without adding another dollar, the race is mathematically over. She's 33, she still works, she likes the work, but she works because she wants to, not because she has to. That's Coastfire. You save hard early, hit a number where compound growth does the rest, and then you're effectively free even if you keep earning. Vicki Robin framed this most powerfully in Your Money or Your Life. Money is life energy. You trade hours of your finite existence for it, which means every purchase isn't just a dollar figure, it's a quantity of your life you're handing over. At a real hourly wage of $20, a $400 monthly habit costs 20 hours of life per month. Is it worth 20 hours? Maybe. The point isn't to stop spending, it's to actually choose, which is something most people never do. So if escaping is possible, and the math proves it is, why is almost nobody doing it? Here's the part nobody wants to hear. The sunk cost fallacy is usually first. Humans have a powerful tendency to continue something because of what's already been invested. Applied to careers, I've spent 15 years building this, I can't walk away now. The 15 years aren't going anywhere whether you stay or go. The only question is what happens to the next 15. But past investment feels like evidence you're on the right path, when really it's just evidence you were on a path. Loss aversion is the second trap and arguably the most powerful. Kahneman and Tversky proved that losses are felt approximately twice as intensely as equivalent gains. When someone imagines leaving their job, they catalog everything they'd lose: salary, health insurance, professional identity, social circle, the feeling of being good at something. Those losses dominate the calculation. The potential gains, freedom, time, not dreading Monday, are more abstract, so they get systematically underweighted. It's not irrational, it's just how the brain handles uncertainty, and it keeps people exactly where they are. Then there are the golden handcuffs. The salary is real, the equity is real, the benefits are real. An analysis of nearly 1.75 million employee surveys found that among people experiencing serious burnout, golden handcuffs was one of the most common phrases used, not to describe what made the job awful, but what made it worth staying. The cage is real, it's just upholstered, and the upholstery gets more expensive every year you stay, which makes leaving feel costlier even as staying becomes more painful. That's not an accident. Okay, the janitor. Ronald Redd was born in 1921 in rural Vermont. First person in his family to graduate high school, walked or hitchhiked 4 miles each way to get there. He worked as a gas station attendant for 25 years, then as a part-time janitor at JCPenney for 17 more. He drove a used Toyota Yaris. Parked in the spots farthest from the entrance to avoid paying meters, his khaki jacket was held together with a safety pin. A patron at Friendly's once paid for his meal, assuming he couldn't afford it. He probably left a generous tip. He had $8 million in the bank. When Ronald Read died at 92 in 2014, his estate was worth nearly $8 million, invested across 95 blue-chip stocks he'd held for decades. He left $4.8 million to his local hospital and $1.2 million to his local library. Even his own family was tremendously surprised. Nobody knew. That was apparently the point. Compare that to Richard Fiscone, former Merrill Lynch executive MBA from the University of Chicago. By every conventional signal, this man had won. He declared bankruptcy around the same period Ronald Read was quietly accumulating millions on a janitor's salary. Morgan Housel uses this contrast in The Psychology of Money to make the point that lands like a punch. Doing well with money has a little to do with how smart you are and a lot to do with how you behave. The difference wasn't intelligence or income, it was the story each of them told themselves about what money is for. Here's the plot twist the whole rat race depends on. You never finding out. The people who escape don't stop working. They just stop working on terms that aren't theirs. A T. Rowe Price study found that 57% of retirees want to keep working in some capacity. 45% specifically choose to work for social and emotional reasons, not financial ones. Pete Adini retired at 30 and then built houses from scratch, started a co-working space, and wrote one of the most widely read personal finance blogs in the world. Financial independence didn't make him stop. It made him start doing things that were actually his. The 2025 World Happiness Report found that believing a lost wallet would be returned correlated with nearly 8 times as much happiness as doubling your income. 8 times. Costa Rica ranks 4th globally in happiness, above almost every European country despite average incomes less than half of American ones. So the pursuit of more money above the level that covers genuine comfort is one of the least efficient paths to well-being ever documented. The finish line was always an illusion. The people who escaped figured that out before everyone else. The rat race isn't a conspiracy. Nobody designed it specifically to trap you. It's just a collection of psychological mechanisms: hedonic adaptation, social comparison, loss aversion, sunk cost thinking, that all happen to point in the same direction. Spend more, earn more, defer the life you actually want until some later date that never quite arrives. The people who quietly escape aren't minimalists or martyrs. They're people who ran the real numbers, saw the treadmill for what it is, and decided the cost, measured in Sundays, dreading Mondays, in years traded for a retirement that keeps getting pushed back, was higher than advertised. They stopped performing wealth and started building it. So quietly that by the time anyone noticed they were gone, they were already somewhere else entirely, not on a beach doing nothing, just not dreading Monday, which, if you think about it, is the thing everyone's been paying for this whole time, and somehow almost nobody's actually buying. Ronald Read drove a used Yaris, wore a jacket held together with a safety pin, and left $8 million to his community. Richard Fiscone had an MBA from Chicago and went bankrupt. Same era, different story. The variable wasn't intelligence or luck or income. It was the story each of them told themselves about what money was for. Figure out your story, run your numbers, and maybe start treating that next raise like it's temporary, even if it isn't. Because the people who escaped didn't find a secret. They just stopped waiting for permission. Just a reminder. I'm not a financial advisor, and this isn't financial advice. Subscribe if you want more of this, and if this video helped, hit the like button. That genuinely helps more people find it.